Sweet Chuck, what's the word?
Kill.
Let me hear it again.
Kill.
Now go for it.
Police officers. They used to be so highly regarded and respected as protectors of our safety. They're there to enforce our traffic laws, respond to emergencies, patrol high crime areas, and, well, save our lives. It's a very noble profession, and one that we take for granted. Pick up the phone and a police officer will come and help you. At least that's how it used to be. Now, today's police departments are under fire, and many are quitting, resigning, refusing to comply, or just not becoming cops at all. There may be ramifications for this, which we will soon discover. But which places are best to be a police officer and which places are worse to be a cop? That's what we're going to discuss today. Let's begin. Okay, so if we're going to have a meaningful discussion about the state of our nation's law enforcement, it makes sense that we should use data and current events. We're going to look at a few data sets for this video: the average pay that an officer gets, the amount of danger police departments face while serving duty, the number of police shootings in each city, and finally, we'll include more recent events to determine a ranking in order to take into account a more contemporary analysis. Let's begin with the best places to be a police officer. We'll spend less time on this so we can get to the worst places to be a cop in today's America, because that's probably what most of you guys want to know. First off, we'll look at the number and rate of police killings, because that's indicative of how stressful it is to be a police officer, and it says something about the relationship that cops have with everyday citizens. I think we would all agree that communities where there's less people being killed is a good thing, right? North Carolina is actually the highest rated when it comes to this category. 4 departments, Greensboro, Durham, Winston-Salem, and Raleigh, all rank towards the very bottom of America's 100 largest cities for raw number of police shootings. Greensboro and Winston-Salem have had 3 such incidents over the past 6 years, which is tied for the third lowest in the country. Raleigh has had 4 and Durham's had 6. All are in the bottom 17. Now, when you look at every single police jurisdiction, including sheriff's departments and police communities with teeny tiny little numbers of police officers on staff, you'll find many with 0 or 1 shooting over the last 6 years. But what stands out the most is the Irvine Police Department, which has had 0 shootings. This is a pretty big city and a large police department. Irvine has 282,000 people and 200 officers. Irvine actually ranks last in the nation in terms of officers per capita at 9 per 10,000 people. That means they don't need a lot of cops to patrol a large area. And if you look at all the stuff they're talking about on Irvine police message boards, it's all about finding lost bicycles and kids giving cops nice notes. That's it. Cops here are even handing out Girl Scout awards. You don't see that in our largest out-of-control cities. So Irvine is clearly a great place to be a cop. Must be nice, Irvine. Must be nice. Other communities that have had very few police shootings: Plano, Texas, Chula Vista, California, which is near San Diego, and the Chesapeake Police Department outside of Virginia Beach. But look at this tidbit. The NYPD has had only 1.3 killings per 1 million people, which is the 5th lowest of our 100 major cities. A lot for Alaska. Cops here in Anchorage are actually paid what they're worth. Kennewick, Washington, Columbus, Ohio, Champaign, Illinois, and Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. All those law enforcement officers are also paid well. Now let's look at safety. Like, which states and cities are the safest, and which areas have the least number of cops who were killed. That's a good metric, right? Cities where police officers don't have to worry so much about crime are places like Naperville, Illinois, Cary, North Carolina, Port St. Lucie, Florida, and Murrieta, California. So if you want to be a cop, those are great places to begin your career, pal. Several states have had 0 police officers killed in the line of duty in the last 6 years. Vermont, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Rhode Island. And those are some of our safest states too. And look at this. New York City ranks way down at the bottom for officers killed in the line of duty. Now, I had speculated that New York would be a terrible place to be a police officer, but the data is starting to say it is not. And here's something else that stands out. So there's this whole thing about inner cities and bad cops and police shootings and abuse, but some of the worst areas in our country, places like Detroit, Philadelphia, Oakland, they have some of the lowest police killings per capita in the country. So here's a look at the areas of our country that are great places for cops, where it's safe, where they pay decent, and where policing isn't resulting in a high number of yearly deaths. Makes sense. Now the part you guys really wanted, the worst places in America to be a cop. Now we're going to look at the same data, but we're going to look at the opposite end of the spectrum. And we're also going to take into account some of the current events happening in today's America. When it comes to the outright most dangerous places for cops to be cops, we can first begin with the areas of our country where most cops are killed. And we can also look at which areas have had the most shootings by a police officer. The LAPD has had by far the highest number of police killings, meaning over the last 6 years, there have been an astounding 113 people killed by cops in LA. If you're curious, and I know you are, of the 133 people killed by LAPD officers, 80 were Hispanic, 19 were black, and 22 were white. So black people are killed at a lower rate here than any other race. And we can surmise that LA is a terrible place for police officers. Los Angeles is a terrible place in general, but that's a whole nother video. But here's some good news. In Los Angeles, LAPD shootings hit a 30-year low last year as the department's changed its policy by using less lethal force. Now this was before all the drama that unfolded over the past summer, but last year, the LAPD only opened fire on 26 suspects, compared to 115 in 1990. What the? Officials attributed the decline in shootings to new policies that emphasize the preservation of life and require officers to use de-escalation tactics whenever possible. Crime has also declined in LA too. In Phoenix, there have been 115 people killed by a police officer, which is also very, very high. Most were either white or Hispanic, only 13 were black. And being large municipalities, you'd expect places like Chicago, New York, and Houston to rank high as well in sheer number of police deaths, and that is the case. But a better way to look at this would be killings by population, or number of people killed by cops per capita, no matter the size of the city. And St. Louis is by far the city with the highest number of people killed per capita, where 18 people per million died during a confrontation with the police. I mean, the next highest city is Oklahoma City, which had nearly 12. Phoenix is third, and Orlando, Spokane, Washington, and Bakersfield, California also rank high in this category. But these aren't our worst inner cities. That's not where cops are shooting people. I mean, Aurora, Illinois, Tulsa, Reno, Albuquerque, Mesa. I think what we're starting to see is some of the worst places to be a cop aren't the places we might have thought.
I don't think I'd ever want to be a police officer.
Why, Mappy? Because it's dangerous?
I don't think anyone would listen to what I have to say.
Mappy, you're kind of right. I mean, if you pulled me over, I don't think I'd even pull over. You weren't very much of an authority figure. Sorry, pal. It's okay. We don't want Mappy to get hurt, right? We'd like him on this show. But would Mappy be a good cop? Let us know in the comments below. Back to the data. In terms of bad places to be a police officer, let's look at the places where police officers are killed. Last year, 55 cops were killed in the line of duty, which is just terrible. Per capita, Tennessee and Arizona have a higher percentage of police officer deaths than any other state. Punta Gorda, Florida has 38 officers on staff now, but has had 2 die while in duty over the last 6 years. And per capita by city, we see many smaller Texas cities on this list. So then Texas would be a dangerous place for police officers, especially in the smaller towns. Now this will be insightful. Let's look at how much cops are paid. But this time, let's see which cops are paid the least amount. Look at Hammond, Louisiana. Sure, Louisiana's a cheap place to live, but the living wage for Hammond is $47,000 for a single parent with 1 kid. But police officers are paid only $30,000 a year in Hammond, Louisiana. That's a terrible place to be a police officer, especially when you consider Hammond has one of the most violent crime rates in the nation. Some of these other cities on this list are also terrible places for cops when you consider their pay and how dangerous they are. Many are in the South. What would happen if they paid police officers the most in areas where crime's the highest and the lowest in places where crime's the lowest? I mean, our police officers are clearly underpaid, especially in smaller, poor communities with huge crime numbers. Of course, the cities that are the most dangerous are going to be terrible places to be a cop today. Here's our list of our most dangerous cities. It's always the same cities every year. These are places where police officers are stressed out, worked to the bone, and threatened, if not daily, fairly often. And finally, let's take into account some current events. Now, if you're anywhere near a phone or a TV, you're pretty much aware that there's a lot of places that are out of control, a topic that we've talked about in a previous video. Portland comes to mind as being a place that would be a bad place for a cop. I mean, look at this place. It's been nearly 2 straight months of persistent and sometimes violent protests where people have called police officers names and thrown things at them. Seattle as well. And in New York, Washington, D.C., Minneapolis, and in L.A., police officers are being let go or reassigned. Which cities are having trouble hiring new officers? All of them. But Phoenix leads the nation with the most number of police officer openings, and Denver, Jacksonville, and D.C. are also high on the list. Read into that how you want. Does our youth even want to be a cop anymore? This article was written 2 years ago, and it clearly shows interest in becoming a cop was plummeting then. They asked people, why don't you want to be a cop? And they were like, duh. People are afraid they'll be sued or held criminally liable for making good faith on the job mistakes. They're being threatened and attacked and booed in the streets. Now, police departments are taking who they can get. They're lowering barriers to entry, and they're relaxing rules on previous drug use and even lowering physical requirements. So what is this all going to mean for police officers in the future? And what is it going to mean for us? What will our streets look like when these notoriously bad areas can't get good men and women to protect our streets? Low pay, physical abuse, and an uncertain future is not only making it tough to patrol our streets, it's increasing the number of bad places for our nation's police officers in general. So can we tie a bow on this? Well, we can look at the data and make some assumptions. In some of the worst places to be a police officer, Phoenix and St. Louis stand out as being a bad place for cops based on the number of police shootings and job openings and bad things going wrong. Smaller, poorer cities in the deep south pay terribly, and these officers have a lot to deal with on a daily basis where crime is high. Officers in cities like Portland and Seattle and New York and D.C. are under fire and experience abuse just about every single day. And of course, Los Angeles and San Francisco. So yeah, I think we'll start there with bad places. So that's it. Our best and worst places to be a cop and the reasons why. Hopefully you learned something. I did. Don't take for granted how safe you feel living where you do, because there's brave people out there risking their lives, and almost all of them are good-hearted people who want their communities to be as good as they can be. And now some really bad singing. Just a bunch of cops trying to do their jobs, enforcing the law even though everyone wants to get rid of us, taking low pay and getting called bad names. That's just what we deal with every single day. Just a bunch of cops trying to do their jobs, but people think they'd want to live their lives with all of the mobs. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great! You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. While we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the US a better place in a positive way.